I want to show the people in the call who've waited through, and I want to show them a little bit about what we're working on at Opentensor right now in the way of getting rid of the root network entirely. So here we are, guys. Whether I share my screen, lovely 76 people. I want to show you guys probably something everyone has looked at a lot. Everyone has seen this table numerous times. And what if every single person had the opportunity to participate in this? This is something that we've been pushing for a long time for a number of reasons. And in December, we had the D-Tao proposal. And I wanted to show people on my screen how that's actually working right now, and how close we are to getting that out to people so they can participate and see how something like D-Tao will work. So should we go there, Victor?
Yeah, sounds awesome.
Cool.
I'm excited.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's my screen, guys. I'm on a really beefy ass machine. We have a working implementation of D-Tao. And it's not going to be released just now. We're going to wait a little bit longer before we release it. There's still some rough edges to smooth out. But here it is, guys. So let's go look at the root network. This is a local net. There's only 10 subnets. But here we have the original design for D-Tao in practice with each of the different types of dynamic tokens for each subnet. And this is a root network of 3 participants. And we can move in and out of this thing. What we want to create is the experience of every single participant in Bittensor being the root network. But we've been working on something called S-Tao for a long time. And we're working with 2 proposals. One's called S-Tao and one's called D-Tao. And in S-Tao, the design is that it's the proportion of stake in each subnet that determines its emission. So this would mean that if you think that NicheNet deserves more emission and is producing good value for Bittensor as a whole, you can stake directly into that subnet and stimulate it. We think, though, that the best way to make that system, let's say we'll call it dynamic or fluid or liquid, is to make the selection of subnets a competitive process. So this is what we're seeing here on the screen. Each of these, I think there's about 10 subnets. We have the root network, alpha, beta, delta, gamma, epsilon. Each of them has their own, you could say, ticker. And there is a relationship between these tokens and Tao. Now, one of the things that we have been working on behind the scenes is making it so that this system is safe to use. A lot of feedback we got with D-Tao was people were scared they wouldn't be able to have a risk-free investment, you could say, or a less risk-free investment than you could say speculating on all of these different subnets. And so what we implemented and are designing, and we'll release research on very soon, is a structure where there's always an option to take a risk-free approach, which is to stake into the root network, whereas power users, for instance, can participate in the selection of the dynamic tokens throughout the ecosystem. So I'm going to show you what that looks like a little bit. So we're using Uniswap pools here. The middle 2 columns showcase the dynamic token relationship. There's an absolute price. The prices determine the emission. And one important thing here is that our goal is to make it so that at any point, if you own 1 Tao, you can always get your proportion of the subnet token. This is an extension of the Bit1 proposal. And that means that the prices of the dynamic tokens converge to 1 over time. And you can always purchase, if you have 1% of Tao, you can always purchase 1% of the dynamic tokens. It's just that they are moving continuously towards a market cap mean, let's say. So the market cap of the subnet tokens is equivalent to the market cap of Tao, a little bit like a stable coin. And I think this is really beautiful. I'm just really excited about showing this to people because I've been working with this over the last little while, and I know I wasn't supposed to present this because it's not quite ready, but I thought people would be interested in seeing this. And Victor is a great person to have on stage because he can ask good questions, knowing how all this stuff works. But one more thing I want to show is everyone is familiar with root weights. Well, now it's going to be stake weights, where everyone can participate in this process of picking a distribution over the subnets speculatively. So if we want to, hey, look, this is exactly the same thing that the root network is doing. Oh, pardon me. I think that these subnets, let's say 0.9, 0.8, 0.5, 0.4, 0.4, 0.3, 1.6. Here we go. And by making, effectively, there's an isomorphism here between stake weights and root weights. From the user's perspective, it all looks the same. There's a more complexity now, obviously, with things like Uniswap in the middle here. And there's also a risk component. But I want to show you guys what that looked like. So I've just made a variety of staking operations across this top row into these different tokens. I've purchased a variety of them. And if we sat here all day long, we would see these token prices. We would see these token prices change every block as new Tao was emitted. And also in equal proportion, each of the subnet tokens being emitted through time. And what this does is it creates a perfect equilibrium based on what people are selecting and the price converging exactly to the a 1 Tao to each alpha token over time. So if you're a subnet that doesn't get attention, if you're not producing, if you're not building stuff, if you're just selling your 18% of inflation. So in the chat here on the call, Battle Cash was coming in and talking about how, there's some anger at subnet owners. They're not working hard enough. They're selling too much money. Well, the nice thing about Dynamic Tao is that if you're mining a subnet or working in a subnet or owning a subnet, and you're just selling your inflation, you drop the price and it protects Tao. So Tao only goes where people are actually holding into these individual subnets. Anyways, so this is just an implementation, guys. We have a branch for this. We're gonna try to push this to a test net sooner than later, so people can participate and see what this is like. It's really fun. Design and style aside, it's actually just really fun to work with this, and we're going to be able to expand almost indefinitely in terms of subnets. We think that we can protect the chain space while having an unbounded set. Likely a Pareto distribution over top of those subnets, so only some will be relevant, but most people can get into the system and build subnets fairly easy, and we can expand into the thousands of subnets at the same time. So, okay, that's what I wanted to show. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I thought, hey, let's end this call on an exciting note. Victor, maybe you have some questions. Okay, let's see. People are people are asking
Thank
questions.
you so much for sharing this. I have a few questions from the chat, so I think we can maybe start with that. And then I think I understand everything except for the pricing mechanism. So I'd like to get back to that.
Yeah. Okay. Let me talk about that. One of the things that can happen when we introduce these dynamic tokens as on the other side of the staking accounts is that people can get crazy and try to create Ponzi schemes, or maybe there's just a wild inflation of the subnet token prices that go way above and beyond the market cap of Tao, let's say. And there's 2 or 3 things that are wrong with that. So one thing that's wrong with that is that we can get massive bubbles that occur, and no one likes that because when there's bubbles, there's contractions, and that's negative. The second one is that if the dynamic tokens diverge from the market cap of Tao, if you're holding 10% of Tao, but it's not staked into the mechanism, you can never re-enter. Does that make sense? Because the prices of the dynamic tokens can be arbitrarily large. So by pegging these prices to a 1-to-1 line with Tao, like a stablecoin would, people will arbitrage that to keep it in place, and you can always enter the system. So if you're, for instance, staked to the root network, which would be a 1-to-1 conversion, and it's a slightly reduced APY, you can still enter the system at some point in the future. For most people, it'll all be the same. If you're not a power user, you don't have to enter the system. You don't have to participate in the dynamic tokens, but you get your APY, and it's just slightly reduced because you're taking less risk. How does that work technically? Basically, if people remember from the Dynamic Tao proposal, there's a set of pools, 1 pool per subnet, and there's a continuous inflation on both sides based on the price. And so there's a proportion of Tao inflation, and there's a proportion of what we'd say like alpha inflation or beta inflation, and all things staying the same. With that inflation coming in at the rate of the price, which is actually just the ratio of the 2 reserves, the prices stay stable, but there's just more value in both of the pools. But what if we stop the inflation of Tao? If we actually cut Tao inflation and we continue emitting the alpha and beta tokens into the subnet pools, the prices converge to 1. They converge back down to 1. They decrease basically until we turn it back on. So in this way, we can effectively have like a stable relationship between the dynamic tokens and the dynamic stake and Tao. Does that make sense, Victor? You're a smart guy.
That makes sense. One question: if I have a large validator and I see like, oh, this subnet is really great, if I stake, let's say, 10 times more of the token to that network, would I get 10 times more D-Tao, or would it be like a logarithmic scale? The more you stake, the more you get.
Well,
you get what I mean?
It's actually exponential. So assuming there's like 1,000 subnets, on average, the price will be 1/1,000 Tao. So it's 1,000th of the price. Each of them has a 21 million cap and the same rate of inflation as Tao. So yeah, if you were to stake 1 Tao, you'd get 1,000 dynamic stake on average, if that makes sense, with slippage, right? So yeah. So you
I think it's slippage part maybe that I'm curious about. I'm just thinking that if I stake a little bit, the price of that D-Tao would increase effectively. If I stake more and more and more, I'm gonna get less and less and less of that token, right?
Because as you like any Uniswap pool, there's effectively slippage where as you purchase more from the pool, you increase the price exponentially Well, it's quadratically. And so our solution to this is really twofold, right? So one fold is that we peg the prices. So that means that you can, if you don't want to get in now, you can get in later, right? So you can move your TAO along slowly. And two, there's still a risk-free APY via the root network. So you can still participate in the ecosystem and still have economic security across the subnets, even though you're not purchasing or moving between the different subnets.
Yeah, and just to clarify, so this means that if someone thinks, oh, NicheNet, that's great, I want to build an app on it, I can stake a lot with this, and price will go up, but I guess that's what you want to get in early if you think something will be promising, and you get extra access to that network and can like monetize it or use the network for whatever you want.
Yeah, I think the question you would ask is this subnet, if there's 1,000 subnets, if the price is one of 1,000, if that's the ratio, the question would be, is it more than 1/1,000th of the value in TAO? And that's exactly the question we want everyone to be answering collectively, right? So that there's a really clear incentive landscape for owners. And this is like the core point. It's, hey, I'm a subnet owner. I don't want to go and talk to a validator and ask them to like what I'm building and get onto novelty search and try to get an audience. That is not a positive incentive landscape. It's not an infinitely continuous incentive landscape. It's a cronyist landscape. So instead, the thing that you want to showcase the collective of people that are demanding access to your subnet is that you can provide them value. So in your particular case, hey, you want to stake into this subnet because it will give you additional access, bandwidth to all of these models that are there, right?
Exactly.
Then that becomes the question that people are asking, and it becomes the question that the owners are asking themselves about how they want to perform better and better. Another thing that's important is that we with D-Tao, we remove in its current iteration, we're removing the ownership key. And instead, owners are just participants with large shares of the subnets. And that's where owners make their return. So if they sell out their own subnet, they're aligned with that in a deep sense, right? They don't want to do that because it will reduce the price for themselves. And also it advertises to everyone else, because their key is doxed. It advertises to everyone else that they're actually not caring, right? That they're running a Ponzi, for instance, right?
They don't believe in their own subnet.
Exactly. And so that shouldn't, if they don't believe in their own subnet, we don't want them to be going around trying to convince other people that they do and lying, right? That's toxic. And instead it's directly visible in the actual pricing mechanisms that we see across the different subnets.
Yeah. By the way, from the perspective of the subnet owner, one thing that might change is that maybe you will go from having like 18 validators that like maybe 2 or 3 actually like know what you're doing and is cooperating.
Yeah.
But the rest might not really know what's going on. To maybe there being like 2 or 3 that have a lot of the dTAO because they believe in you. You like work closely with them, and like you maybe create these like improvement of life for the subnet owner in that way. What do you think about that?
Exactly. And we want the subnet owners to also be holders of their subnets. And so they can validate their own subnets, and there's a direct alignment here where the subnet owners can monetize themselves. And their bottom lines are the same. And right now it's just not the case, and nor are the miners, right? And like you can have a situation where the miners discover a way of they discover a way of mining a subnet. It's not known to the owners that they're just mining their subnet, and they're selling the Tao. In D-Tao, if you have this kind of leak, you could say incentive leak, where the miners are not producing value, right? And they're unstaking. We protect Tao globally, right? So and that's really positive, right? So instead, you want to build your miners as holders, right? They're mining their subnet. They believe in their subnet. They actually help develop the subnet, because very viscerally, they are taking a share of the thing that they are participating in. And then this, I hope, stimulates a lot more collaboration. And another reason why we need this is, if we do not distribute the ownership of the subnets themselves, we don't make them decentralized. And again, it just lends to the concept of them being securities, right? We need it to be the case that it is a variety of people that own it and take share and participate and care about the technology, and also that the ownership of the thing can be dynamic itself, right? So if the owner sells and other people hold, they actually become the quote unquote owners of the subnet.
Well, quick question about that. So if you want to change hyperparameters for a subnet, would there be an owner key for that, or would it be some kind of vote, or like the biggest holder gets to decide, or how does it work?
Yeah, we are building a micro government systems inside of the subnets around the...
Wow.
Yeah. So right now, in current implementation, it's just the largest holder by stake. And this initially goes to the owners, because they're the ones who get the initial tokens. And mathematically, we can actually figure out, like, after X amount of months, if they do nothing but validate, they'll have 18%. And then after that point, they will be taken over, let's say, by other participants in the network, miners, other validators, other people that participate, really care about, love the mechanisms. They can take over, and it's just a raw calculation of how much dynamic token you have, but in the future, it could be much more involved, and we want to make it recursively similar, let's say, to how Bittensor is governing itself right now.
Yeah, that's really cool. One follow-up question on that. If I really believe in my own subnet, and I want to keep a large share of it, the only thing I should do is, like, hold on, like, don't sell anything, try to buy in more early if I can, and then it's gonna be, like, over time diluted, but yeah, I should just hold on as much as possible.
Exactly. It reflects very much the same thing that happened to the early Bittensor miners, right? They're diluted over time, which is positive. We want that dilution. We want that decentralization. We want the subnets to be decentralized themselves. And if we can get all 1,000 of them decentralized, we really do meet that goal of economic decentralization for the entire ecosystem. I imagine that like the individual subnets will create communities around themselves that have the goal of effectively capturing as much Tao as they can collectively into their pool, right? It'll be very interesting to see how this plays out between subnets, and I'm sure that it'll be like we're definitely aware that this is like, it's like Bittensor on steroids. It's
Bittensor within Bittensor, and then subnets within subnets.
Yeah, exactly. Let's take some questions. If anybody wants to come on the stage and talk, or like we can go like that. We can talk this way if people are interested.
I have a few questions from chat I can read. One is about staking. Do you have to pick which validator you want to stake with once for each subnet token?
Yeah. Let me show you guys on the screen again. This is really cool. Okay, so you guys can see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Great. So By the way, S-Tao and D-Tao are, they're actually very, very similar. They're about, written properly. They're about like 100 lines in Bittensor. That's how similar they are. The concept of staking into individual subnets with a validator. But that was a specific question. Like, do you stake into a validator into a subnet? Yes. And the answer is yes. So I'm just going to show the root network right now for this toy chain, right? These are all my keys. They're all delegates, right? So we can do, we can stake, let's stake into, so these are all my local, these are my local keys, but you can also use a delegate here. Like you would list delegates and you can see the same thing. But in this case, I own all these ones. So let's go with the second one here. And let's stake into, which one should we pick, Victor? Subnet 6, Subnet 7, Subnet 6. Okay.
6, yeah, sure.
Okay. Let's stake 100, right? And so what does this show, right? So it says, hey, you're staking from here to this key, which is a delegate, right? And on a subnet. So NetUID 6. So NetUID 6, I think, oh God, remind me what that symbol is. It's just after epsilon, right? So because of the current price relationship between the amount of the Tao and this subnet token, we actually pull out 2,889, but there's some slippage here. And so you can see this is the 34 token slippage. This is just based on the pool, right? So people will, have to make decisions about when they want to do this, and there will be opportunities for MEV. But one thing is that the way that we're trying to design this is so that people make staking operations once a day by picking a whole variety of subnets and rebalancing their distribution based on what they think, as if for the root network. And we have limits on when you can do staking operations. So if people intend to do things like MEV, they would have to break up into a lot of different accounts in order to do this kind of thing. And then also, finally, one of the benefits of having a proof of authority chain right now is that transactions are not ordered. They're randomly ordered, and so it's very difficult to perform MEV on Bittensor as it is right now. Anyways, so let's go and we'll do this. There you go. So we performed that staking operation.
So it was was it 100 Tao you staked, and then you staked it to a specific key and a specific subnet?
Exactly. And so
okay, cool.
And so we can see this right here. So there was some slippage. The actual amount that we got out was slightly different. I'm not sure if that's calculated perfectly, but yeah, the exact value is down here. Right. So 2,891. And we have this is our Tao equivalent balance in blue. So we can actually measure, in the paper, there was a concept of a GDT, like global dynamic Tao. We can calculate that term, in each of the subnets as well. So you can see that effectively we have 101 Tao stake in that subnet. That's without slippage, right? So if we were to unstake 2,891, we wouldn't get back exactly a 101. So there's slippage when you swap pools. But we can, I showed to the crowd on my screen.
It should add up to if you unstake, it should add up to exactly 100 Tao, right? Because the slippage goes the same both ways.
It's the same both ways. Exactly. Yeah. But hence where MEV comes from, right? And this is probably, this has changed some prices here. So we can take a look at this. We can see how we went to subnet 6. It probably changed the price just slightly here. Don't worry about these this was just an artifact of me messing around with things earlier and unstaking massive amounts of the token. As you can see, we can actually drive these prices up quite substantially high. And so this will be in this state, right? Because the price is some more than one. There would be no Tao inflation at all until the price is dropped. Does that make sense? So if people allocate a lot, it actually drops the price, and you can work with that.
One question: does this affect miner rewards then?
It doesn't affect miner rewards in the dynamic token, if that makes sense. So they, from their perspective, inflation is the same, right? But if they are...
They get the same amount in... No. Go on.
But they need to convert things back to Tao to understand what those prices actually are. Does that make sense? So maybe they're increasing, they're getting the same amount of inflation, but that inflation is actually measured in a separate... it's measured differently, right? Because the price has changed or increased or decreased.
I'm not sure I quite follow. So is the inflation rate then it is changed so that there would be no inflation on that Tao subnet with high Tao price, right?
There'd be no Tao inflation. This is really important. So there's no Tao inflation through the left-hand side of the pool.
Oh, okay. Now I get it.
Yeah.
So then you emit only D-Tao.
Exactly.
In that network. But
exactly.
You don't emit any of the new Tao.
Exactly. And so when this happens, it'll be very interesting because what will happen is people note that the prices are above 1, and people will arbitrage that because it has to come back down, if that makes sense. Just over time. And so people will arbitrage that and bring the prices back down. And we should see like that there's, which creates liquidity, right? For the entire system, right? We can imagine like right now, the prices, the emission values for the subnets, it's very illiquid, right? Maybe it changes once a week, right? For in a major way for some subnets, but with D-Tao, subnet owners will be able to directly see the effects of their changes on their dynamic token, and that I think is the best reward signal for getting subnet owners to build good products, right? Like imagine if that was, instead of having to come on this call and having to call us up and get us some feedback, if that feedback was immediate.
Yeah. You like the market is super intelligent, basically. That's super intelligence on Earth.
Yeah.
So if you can create markets as a feedback signal, that's very valuable.
Yes. So, okay, some questions here about like timeline, documentation. We're staying the course. We always said, hey, look, we're going to release this on a test net first. We're going to prepare documentation. I may have jumped the gun by showing this to you guys because it's not ready. I just got really excited and I wanted to show off what we're doing. But yeah, like the timeline here is like, look, no one is going to get jumped with these changes. People will have opportunity to work with these branches and actually work with them in the testnet, and then finally there will be a vote on whether or not this goes through. And we actually have 2 proposals. We have S-Tao and D-Tao effectively ready. Both of them could go through. I'm a proponent of D-Tao for many reasons. But if there are people that are opting for that direction, that is something we can propose as well. I kind of think that like there are problems with S-Tao, and one of them is just that people, there's not negative effects for improperly allocating your stake. And without that, people just won't really participate in the same visceral way that they would participate with dynamic Tao. So also, like, we built this based on the feedback from people, which was a lot of people were like, hey, I need to be able to participate in Bittensor without risking funds. So we implemented that. And for most people, this could turn on tomorrow and they would hardly notice the difference. And that's what we wanted to create.
Yeah, because for validators, if they just stake across subnets equally, it's no change. For miners, they will still earn. They will just have to convert it to Tao. For subnet owners, they get sort of like, they get a token that increases in value with what the work they do, and also access to the network instead of getting Tao directly,
which is connected to them. Exactly.
Exactly. It's their own work.
We have done the math here. With this change on dTAO, we can actually take away the subnet limit.
Wow.
Yeah. And instead, what we will do is do dynamic tempos, so that subnets that are underperforming will just not have the time to run their tempo. Or it will be a very slow tempo, once a day kind of thing. And if it's really, 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 really low, we can have once a week. But it would also allow you to sort of revive a subnet. So there's no concept of like a liquidation event. If the subnet underperforms and the owners leave, the miners, validators, and holders of that subnet can actually pick it up, or have someone who comes in and says, "Hey, we don't even want to run the lock cost. We're just going to buy out this subnet and take the slot and take it with us, right? Because we have a community with us, right?" We think it would be really interesting to see how that plays out when we don't need to delete things.
Yeah. Because I've been talking with people that say like, "Oh, I would love to start a subnet, but I'm a bit worried, can I get a slot?"
Right.
So this would effectively solve it, so that anyone that believes in themselves can set something up. But if you don't believe in it, you have no incentive to do it.
Exactly. Another cool thing about the convergence on the price is that you can come to Bittensor later, and you haven't lost out. In fact, potentially it's the people that try to get in early, that try to snipe things, that they pay more because they have to. There's more slippage when the pools are just initializing, so it drives down the intensity of people needing to enter all of the subnets, and keeps the system sort of well balanced.
Yeah, so if you like a subnet, you would probably like invest in it over a long period of time.
Exactly.
Unless you immediately can derive a lot of value, which is possible on some subnets. Like, oh, I have this app, I need this subnet.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing that's cool that we think we can do that was on the demo I just showed you. We can have subnets that are not dynamic. And a subnet can choose that. Be like, I don't want to do this. I just want to use a raw emission, and we can give them like a middle of the pack emission, or something slightly less than that. So we don't like want that to happen, but if there are some subnets that just don't want to participate, and they can't participate for some reason or another, we want to open that option to them as well. So like if you're
it's a mix of D-Tao and S-Tao.
Yeah, because I was saying before, it's like S-Tao and D-Tao are the same thing. They quite literally are just a couple lines difference. Right? Like one is like, oh, hey, well, the staking operation is dynamic, or the staking operation is not dynamic, which is nice. And so it's like S-Tao is just D-Tao without a single function between the staking operations. And we can then have both S-Tao and D-Tao. Yeah. Cool. Well, let's have some questions from the channel. Are there any good ones out there? Or people want to come on the stage and chat?
I think there are. Some of you have already answered. I'm going through them.
Does the staking operation provide the bandwidth from Caro, or do you still need to run a key? You still need to run a key. Exactly. you still need to, you need to actually, I don't know how we would work in the other way, Caro. But I'm curious. You can also stake with somebody that's running a validator in the subnet, same as it is right now with delegation, right? You can stake with Opentensor Foundation, and you can then, cut a deal with them based on that or something. But yeah, it's still Yuma Consensus in the core of the subnets, if that's the question. And in that case, you do actually need to own a key.
We have a comment from Big Red that new subnets will need to put themselves on the map with marketing and such. But I'm not sure I don't think that's necessary. If you have a good subnet, you can kind of start it on your own. And if it produces value, more people will join.
Yeah. Oh, there is one more thing that I wanted to show you guys that is very important and very cool. So there is an interplay here between delegates and the subnets. And specifically, the interplay is around the way in which delegate take is set. So currently, delegate take is 18%. Everyone's familiar with that. A lot of people have got around that concept. They get around that concept by doing things like rakebacks, which happen outside of the chain. But with S-Tao and D-Tao, we can set specific take values per subnet. So the Opentensor Foundation, for instance, who is, we're currently on a path to monetize our Tao. We can say, hey, look, if you stake with us on subnet 21, for instance, or subnet 23, as an example, we will take 0. And therefore, give everybody who's staking in that direction more APR on the delegation on that delegation. So through that process, the Opentensor Foundation can say, hey, we think these subnets are actually really positive. We're willing to take less of a take and give you guys more dividends in order to get more access for these subnets. Does that make sense, Victor?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to show you guys what that looks like. So here is, it's not beautiful. It's going to be more beautiful later. Sorry.
It's beautiful in the idea world. It's just that the materialistic world hasn't caught up yet.
But let's show this what it looks like. So here's in S-Tao, there's this concept of subnet-specific take. So it should be a table. It should be more beautiful than this. But what you can see here is for these delegates, they have the ability to set the take per subnet. Now, we're taking this concept even farther, where if you're a validator that really wants to have people delegate stake to you on a subnet, you can go below 0 in terms of take.
I want to ask that.
Yeah. And you can, and the way you do that is you actually stake Tao to your key and don't take any delegation fees from that. So you pay your inflation and nominators stake to you because you're going to give them the best APY on the subnet. So this is like the new root network effectively. And Opentensor will use this tooling directly because we want to build a services company alongside of Opentensor technologies effectively that is monetizing Tao, because we have a lot of delegated stake, but we want to prove that we want to prove to effectively Tao holders that they should stake to us on specific subnets. This is a valuable subnet. Please give us more but this one's not great. We'll take a huge take if you really want to stake with us. And this creates a competitive interplay, but also drives raw demand for a validator that can pick specifically like, hey, I really, really need the bandwidth on 18 or the storage on 21, which is, I can build a for-profit company, but I need Tao in order to do that. So it really showcases this relationship, and we, this is kind of a next stage for us as a community, but also we get the root network back. The root participants get to still feel like they're the kings of the universe, and that's important.
Yeah. And that's important also because right now you really need a validator to actually monetize your access to a network. But with this, it kind of trickles down back to the people that actually delegates to the validator as well.
Yes, and it's also elastic in the amount of Tao you have. So if you want to build a for-profit company, and you, in order to get the bandwidth that is required to build that for-profit company on something like Core Cell's Subnet 18, and you think you can sell it for a good price, you can attract that elastic delegation by the fact that you are dropping your take, and then also delegating Tao to yourself in that subnet. So this is, I think, one of the ways that we want to drive the monetization of Tao. It's the first step. It's not the last step, but it's one of the most important ones where we think that we will definitely, we're playing this role ourselves at Opentensor, right? We are going to be monetizing our own Tao, and we want to be competitive in that same market.
Yeah, it's a bit like if you have the niche net, you basically buy into. You basically, instead of having your own validator, you can just delegate to it and get the reward for the images your rate limit produces, basically. So if I say I want to generate a lot of images, well, then I'm gonna give away part of my reward or all of it to other people just so I can use their rate limit, and they get paid basically for lending me Tao.
Exactly. Victor, you're awesome to have on the stage here. You're like a Bittensor guru. There's
that title is taken.
Oh yeah, it's right by multiple people on Twitter. The question: are we running any simulations that will be, or will there be a test net to see what kind of problems can occur in such new dynamics? Are we going to dive in? Look, we're absolutely not going to push this to mainnet without testing. We're on a super staging net right now. We'll let you guys know when we're on the dev net, let alone on the test net. And then it will go up for vote, and then only if we're successful in that vote will this proposal go onto mainnet. We really hope that people are as excited as us about it, and hopefully we get some good feedback over the next couple of days from this demo. I wasn't supposed to do the demo today, but here we are. Yeah. Okay, great. Any more questions from people in the crowd? Anybody want to come on stage, ask questions for Victor as well, because we just had a call with him. And Nishnet.
I have one follow-up question.
Yeah, please.
So currently, if some validator thinks, oh, these subnets, I don't like them, I don't want to use them, then they would probably give stake to the root net or net 0. But that doesn't affect much because they still have rate limit on all of them. Do you think it will emerge like a, I don't know, kind of rake back subnet? So if you don't like any of the other subnets, you just go there and then you get everything you stake back, so nothing goes to miners?
No. So we have chosen to be very restrictive on purpose about the way in which subnets are allowed to be run, because we know that this industry, even when we're really careful in the 32 subnets, people attempt to run all sorts of different Ponzi's, right? And manipulate the system. So we even the allowing people to turn off registrations is a problem on current subnets, right? So we are sticking to our guns about the way in which we think these networks should be created and what the initial distributions of the tokens should be. We think that they should be organic and there shouldn't be things like pre-mines, and we think that it should take time for the prices to be determined, and that they're more like organically priced in over time, and that the subnet owners can't change the relationship between the validators and the miners, and that's on purpose, because so we have this thing called the root network nodes, right? They get 50% of the emission, and that's a very valuable tool, regulatory, like regulation in the machine learning sense, and also you could say in the governmental sense, because if there is a subnet that is literally just they're just attempting to create some sort of like holders Ponzi, root participants, people like you and me that don't even know about this subnet, will come to own a large enough share that we can express our perspectives, which would be that, hey, this is not good for Bittensor, and we're going to unstake from this subnet. And that's just because a global dynamic Tao gets Tao. So there was one of the first results in the paper, the Bit1 paper, was just how it was impossible for a subnet that is unattractive to increase its price just arbitrarily, if assuming that there is a well-organized group of the remainder of people that are saying, hey, we don't want to. It's sort of like the 51% proof in the original paper. If that makes sense.
I think I get it, but just to clarify, let's say there are two subnets, one that is doing something and paying miners for that task, and one that just miners mine by sending USD tether to the validators,
right,
for example.
Right.
And that's basically a rakeback system with an extra step. So
exactly.
That would happen. Is it that everyone who does not like that subnet, they would gain control over it and like change it or shut it down, or how would that work?
Well, the way it works is that the way that these Ponzi's work in the overall market, right, is that the developers have all of the supply, and there's not that much liquidity, and no one can sell the token. Do you see what I'm saying? Because no one has any of it. So if it goes up to infinity, right, there's no one to sell it because the developers have all the tokens, and so they can effectively run a pump and dump scheme on people, right? People get attracted to the prices increasing, and no one can sell it, and everyone thinks it's a new thing, and then the price drops, right? And people lose a lot of money. But if there is a large share of people that own that subnet, if there's a large share of people that own that subnet that are not participating in the Ponzi, they can just sell the price. So they can sell it. So 50% of the validation rewards come from weight outside of the subnet, if that makes sense, right? So those people are not participating in the Ponzi. Right? Maybe the people that create the Ponzi could limit the people that own it, right? But because of that hard cap, right, where 50% is owned by global dynamic Tao, people are not going to purchase you're not going to stake into your subnet, right? And they're going to unstake from your subnet because this is a Ponzi, right? And you also don't get to control the miners too much, right? And this is why we don't give too much control to the subnet owners, right? Like if you want to build a validation system where you just only reward the guys that you like, say the ones that don't sell, you still need to get these other participants like the Opentensor Foundation to run that validator. Does that make sense? And if we don't run the validator, we're probably just going to unstake from that subnet. So I think that's what I mean by regulation, or like in the machine learning sense, like there's regulation in different layers of a neural network. It's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, I am 100% with you with how you prevent Ponzi schemes. I'm still not sure if I think maybe I use the Tether network, if it gets in some support, because I think some people would just like, oh, I get USD Tether from this network, and I don't want to set up my validator with an app or something like that. But then you're saying like, oh, people would actually shut it down,
yeah,
forcefully. Like,
well, if you remember back to the demo I was giving, the major operation that people will use, because it allows you to stake and unstake and then stake again in different subnets, is that you literally select a distribution of the subnets that you know. You're like, hey, subnet 1, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16, and these net UIDs, and these proportions. When you do that, you actually unstake from everyone else, right?
Yeah.
So unless you're literally attracting people into wanting to own this particular share of this digital commodity system that you're producing, you're going to have extreme downward pressure on the prices. Now, and one of the questions also is that can people snipe? This is why we went with an organic emission schedule, just like with Bittensor itself, right? There was only 1 or so million Tao inflated in the first year, right? And then again in the next year, and again in the next year. And because it is a slow drip, and because if you pump the prices up, they drop, it's kind of like you would, what's that called? DCA, like when you slow
dollar cost average.
Yeah, exactly. There's not enough of the supply available at the initially for you to actually purchase. So even if you just started buying them all on the first day, and the next day, in the first week, in the first month, there's only so much supply that you can get, and it's minting at 7,200 per day, right? So this really makes it difficult to snipe, and that's one of the reasons why we didn't do like a sort of more of like an ICO strategy, like initial distribution to individuals that in an auction, right? We didn't want to do that because it would allow you to perform these kind of snipe operations where the only thing that you could potentially hide a subnet for a long time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's more likely, but again, you'd have to hide them for a really long time, even in 6 months with it. Like that's not that much compared to the total supply of the subnet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. That was a great question from Uncle Luck. Is there concern that subnet owners will not be able to sell their subnet token in if D-Tao passes? Will be able to? Will not. The token would have to be sold transparently. The community can consider dumping. Yeah, exactly. So we are considering limitations on the ability for the subnet owners to unstake their specific allocations that they get through the lock cost in a certain period of time, so that there's basically a slow burn on that. And yes, we do want it to be public. Like we definitely want the owners of the subnet to be known. That's I think a very positive thing for other people that are participating in the subnet to know that the subnet owners are not just going to mess off, right? And so that requires transparency. Someone says, has anyone asked what happens to a current stake Tao when the transition happens? Nicely, it just goes directly into the root network. So like, I'm going to share my screen again so people can see these pretty graphs. Let's go. So you can see this is these are some staking accounts on this chain, and this is the root network right here. So you'll be able to hold your Tao in the root network. The price is 1-to-1. So it's just Tao. And it's that's where everyone's Tao will be initially, let's say. It's just right there in this column. So there's no migration required in order to do this. Well, actually, there is a migration requirement, but effectively to the user, your account, where it is, delegation, unstaking, staking, everything that will look exactly the same, except an additional NetUID parameter.
Yeah, and that APR, it's the same as it would be now, like the way you have, or the Tao you have. No.
So APRs will have to change, and they have to change in order to effectively pay for the people that are the power users doing this selection process, if that makes sense. So there has to be something there has to be some fuel for the fire, so to speak, for that process to actually work, which is one of the reasons why we think D-Tao is required over S-Tao, because S-Tao there just isn't any. And we were just looking at it ourselves and going, hey, like, am I going to care? Like, I have 1/100th of Tao and my movements hardly matter. So we felt like S-Tao is almost like the worst of both worlds, because now we move to a anonymous system where people don't even have their reputations on the line, and we want everyone to coordinate well. I just feel like it's not likely to happen with S-Tao.
Yeah, I get that.
So the ballpark for the APR cut is 50%. With that,
and that extra emission would go into the different subnets, basically.
Effectively, technically it's because of this. It's because we are weighting the Tao that is in the root network against the Tao which is in the subnet when we're doing Yuma Consensus. So it's a weighted relationship between those two values, and that's an alpha term, you could say, in a weighted sum, and that term is 50%, 0.5, which means that 50% of the control goes to global Tao, and the other 50% goes to the Subnet-Specific Tao. And that is where the APR gets cut in half. If you're only holding it on the root network, you get 50% of everything, but mixed amongst a whole bunch of other people, right? So that's where the cut comes from.
Yeah. Also, one question. Slippage, is that a hyperparameter you set? Like, how much slippage should there be?
No, slippage is a function of Uniswap pools, right? So what we on the screen when I was demoing that was a really high slippage because I was pulling out like 50% of the supply in the pool. But those numbers will decrease substantially over time, because eventually what happens is almost all the Tao will be allocated into the pools, and 21 million alpha or 10 million alpha will be on the other side of the pool. So because of the way that the inflations are working, like the inflation of Tao is going right into the pools. So over the next 5 million Tao will go into the pools. And because of that, there's a huge amount of volume, and therefore a lot less slippage. It'd be like if all of Bitcoin's volume, like every Bitcoin in existence, was in a Uniswap pool, right? Or all of Ethereum was in one Uniswap pool. You would see that the slippage is really low comparatively, and that's good for things like stopping MEV. It'll be difficult and require some time and thought to allocate hundreds of thousands of Tao. You'd have to do that over like 6 months or something like that.
Yeah, but so slippage is a function based on the size of these pools. But
yeah,
isn't there also some hyperparameter in there that you could increase and decrease, how much the price changes as well, or?
No, because of that's the way that Uniswap pools work. That it's a function of the reserves, and that keeps all the accounting so that nothing gets lost or nothing gets gained, and you don't have like leaked increases in either token. Yeah. But yeah, people that are interested in this can, I mean, you can do the math yourself. You can code it up in a GPT-4 interpreter, and be like, hey, give me the Uniswap contract in Python and let me test some slippage out with different terms. In the first day, which is when this chain I was just showing you today was the first day, right? There'll be 7,200 alpha token in the pool. It's not much. But then there's 14,000, right? And there's also alpha that is being emitted into the subnets as well. So very quickly you get thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands, millions of supply in the pools.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That makes sense. I will have to read more about Uniswap protocols after this.
Yeah. Great. Well, it's exactly 6:00. So it's been a 2-hour call. I think an interesting one, fun one. Looking forward to people's questions about this. If very shortly we will release the branch so people can mess around with it and instructions and all these things. Someone says, is there a question that's been answered? Has anyone asked what happens to the current stake Tao? Yeah, this question was answered, Kareem. It just exists on the root network and gets a slightly reduced APY if you don't want to participate in the dynamic aspect of the network. So it's like a reduced risk, zero risk, assuming that holding Tao is zero risk strategy. Thanks, Kareem. Mike is typing.
Also,
unless Mike has a question, Mike, hurry up and type. Okay.
Anytime I can say I've recorded this. I will probably upload 2 videos. Cool. One of the full thing and one of only this last part for people that want specifically to watch this. And we'll share it tomorrow.
Yeah, awesome. We have the recording as well. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming to the call. Thanks, guys. This was really fun. More to come on this. Papers, tutorials, instructions, documentation, examples, test nets, staging nets, main nets, proposal votes. Thank you, everybody. Ciao, Nick. Ciao, Zion. Ciao, Seth. Bye, Chris. OX Walsh. Ciao, guys. Bye.
Thank you.